Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we are going to learn in chapter 14. It is analyzing discourse. We are from Sunflower Group. They are me, Alfi, masruroh, and then Dwi Sulis Setyowati, Farhan Ramadhan, and the last Faridha Sigmayana. For the first, we are going to learn pragmatics and politeness theory. Do you know pragmatics? What is pragmatics? Pragmatics analyze meaning beyond grammar and words meaning, found the relationship between participants and the background knowledge they bring to a situation. So, pragmatics is concerned with analysis of meaning in interactions. For example, you didn't buy a paper, and I can hear someone talking. The word paper refers to a newspaper and acknowledge that it is an interrogative structure not enough to clearly decode the meaning. It can be interpreted as a request information, or a complaint, or even a reprimand, depending on the social relationship between participants and the background expectation about the purchase of newspaper in the household. Language, although example 2 can be treated as a declarative, simple statement of fact, that is can convey a lot more meaning, depending on who is telling it to whom. Then, conversational maxims and implicators. Do you know maxims? Maxims is a linguistic rule in lingual interactions. The rules that govern his exchange, use of language, and interpretation of the actions and speech of the interlocutor. Apart from that, maxim is also referred to as a form of pragmatics based on the principle of cooperation. Paul Chris formulated proposal into 4 maxims of cooperative discussion, which can be summarized as follows. First, quantity. Quantity says as much as, but no more than is necessary. Second, quality. Do not say what you believe to be false, or that for which you lack evidence. The third, relation, is be relevant. In the last manner, be clear, unambiguous, brief, and orderly. For example, Harry does not like lending the family car to the children. Joyce knows this, but she has just lent their car to their son. Then, Harry, where's the car? Joyce, then need to do some shopping. This example looks like a perfectly normal conversation, but if you look carefully at Joyce's U-turns, you will see that it does not actually answer Harry's questions. Joyce's answer does not follow Grace's conversational maxim of relevance, and hence it generates a conversational implicator. We can infer more than is literally said. Again, the address infers, on the basis of logic and knowledge of the word, that something additional is being conveyed to what is explicitly stated. And then, conversational maxims and politeness. Do you know politeness? Politeness entails taking account of social factors, such as how well you know somebody, what their social role or relative status in relation to yours and the kind of social context in which you are interacting. Robin Lakoff, an American pragmatics researcher, introduced the three rules of politeness. It is don't impose. Example, use models and hikes. I wonder if I might just open the window a little. The second is give options. For example, use interrogatives including take questions. Do you mind if I open the window? It would be nice to have the window open a little, wouldn't it? And the last, be friendly. For example, use informal expression. Either means, example, be a honey and open the window, darling. The last is sociolinguistic and politeness. A pragmatic approach to the analysis of language emphasizes that the interpretation of meaning requires careful attention to context. Judgments about what counts as polite, friendly, or impolite behavior are very much a matter of dynamic negotiation between participants in particular social and cultural contexts. Different participants may interpret the same interaction quite differently. As this section has indicated, a good deal of pragmatic research has tended to concentrate on the analysis of speech arts, and even on features of single utterance or very short exchange. By contrast, the ethnography of speaking framework, which is described in the next section, focuses rather on speech even as a whole and embraces the total social and cultural setting as components in the analysis. I think enough from me. Thank you for your attention.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dwi Sulis and I want to explain about ethnography speaking. The ethnography of communication, or EOC, originally called the ethnography of speaking, is the analysis of communication within the wider context of the social and cultural practice and beliefs of the members of a particular culture or speech community. It comes from ethnographic research. It is a method of discourse analysis in linguistics that draws on the anthropological field, the communicative form, which may include but is not limited to spoken language and its function within the given culture. The example: Harris was a very decorous and proper linguist who had to draw attention to herself or to break the rules when attending events hosted by people from a culture other than her own. On one occasion, at a cafe drinking even in Venezuela, she whispered to her more culturally experienced companion, "Is it okay to leave the circle temporarily?" When he reassured her this way, she hastily left and could then be heard quietly vomited on the brush. The framework that hymnists developed for the analysis of communicative events involved the following components. First, genre or type of event. The example: phone call, conversation, business meeting, lesson, interview, or blog. And then topic, or what people are talking about. The example: holiday, sport, sociolinguistic, and politics. And then purpose or function, the reasons for the talk. The example: to plan an event, to catch up socially, then to teach something, and then to persuade someone to help you. And then setting, where the talk take place. The example: at home, in classroom, in an office, and then K or emotional tone. The example: serious, jocular, sarcastic. And then participant, characteristic of this person and their relationship. The example: sex, age, social status, role and role relationship. And the example: mother daughter, teacher pupil, TV interviewer, interview and audience. And then message from code and or channel. The example: telephone, letter, email, language and language variety, nonverbal. And then message contents are specific details of what the communication is about. The example: organizing a time for a football match, describing how a tap works, describing how to make a roti. And the example: and then X. Sequence are ordering of speech. X. The example: greeting, meeting, turn, taking rules, ending a telephone conversation. And then rules for interaction are prescribed orders of speaking. The example: who must speak first, who must respond to the celebrant at a wedding, who close a business meeting. And the last, norms for interpretation of what is going on. Using the ethnography communication framework to compare this event with a more traditional European wedding generates some obvious questions about the ways that weddings are organized in different communities, such as: are there restrictions on the setting or the place where the core wedding ceremony may take place? Who acts as organizer or MC? Who are the core participants? Who gets to speak and for how long? What role, if any, do the parents of the bride and groom play? How much flexibility is there in the word utterance at different points? Is music an essential or an optional component? What are the unspoken assumptions about is not permitted? The example: response to requests regarding implements to the marriage, contribution from other than the side speakers. Insiders and outsiders. The role of the researcher as an insider or an outsider in the community. There has been a great deal of discussion in social linguistics about the relative advantage of researching a culture from the inside as a member of community, as opposed to coming into a community as a researcher from outside. Early sociolinguistic and anthropological linguistics were typically outsiders in the culture they researched and described. This had some advantage since it was often easier to identify ways of speaking and rules of interaction that contrast with those they were familiar with. Researchers noticed when there was a silence where they expect to hear talk, for example, and vice versa. They noticed restrictions on speaking rights which differ from those in their own society, and so on. However, an outsider's evaluation of what certain utterance, for instance, mean may be rather different from the evaluation of those who are insiders in the culture. It is easy to misinterpret the significance of a gesture or an utterance or even of silence if you assume you know what it means and thus never question its significance. Uh, the example: the reason for silence between two Canadians who have just met for the first time cannot be interpreted by someone from outside the culture. Without a sound knowledge of the culture, an outsider would find very puzzling in since returning formulatic talk to dispel any attention is the normal means greeting a stranger in many Western communities. For the Canadians of Panama, however, a formulatic silence is an appropriate response to an ambiguous or unpredictable situation where the status of the participant is unclear.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Faridha Sigmayana and I will continue explaining the material. Number 3, instructional sociolinguistic. Instructional sociolinguistic is concerned with how speakers signal and interpret meaning in social interaction. Focus on how people from different cultures may share grammatical knowledge of a language, but differently contextualize what is said such that very different messages are produced. Instructional sociolinguistic attempts to bridge how gulf between empirical communicative forms, example, words, prosody, register shift, and what speakers and listeners take themselves to be doing with this form methodologically. It relies on close discourse analysis of audio or video recorder interactions. Such methodology is central to uncovering meaning-making process because many conversations from signaling and interpreting meaning in talk are fleeting, unconscious, and culturally variable. Jadi, instruksional sosiolinguistik itu berkaitan dengan bagaimana penutur memberi sinyal dan menafsirkan makna dalam interaksi sosial. Ini fokus pada bagaimana orang-orang dari budaya yang berbeda dapat berbagi pengetahuan gramatikal dari suatu bahasa, tetapi secara berbeda mengkontekstualisasikannya. Apa yang dikatakan sehingga pesan yang sangat berbeda dihasilkan, sehingga menghasilkan pesan yang sangat berbeda. Instruksional sosiolinguistik ini juga mencoba untuk menjembatani jurang antara komunikasi empiris dengan istilah. Instructional sociolinguistics typically make use of the detailed tools of conversation analysis, paying careful attention to turn-taking behavior, hesitations, pause, and paralinguistic behavior. For example, signs, laughter, in-breaths, etc. Based on the reading of instructional sociolinguistic, what will we pay attention to in an interaction? Such aspects of interaction as turn-taking rules, conversation for indicating acknowledgement and agreement, the taking of utterance as particular kinds of speech art, or as containing important information are also variable that is used different contexts or by different kinds of speakers. Jadi, ahli sosiolinguistik, instruksional sosiolinguistik ini biasanya menggunakan analisis percakapan yang terperinci, memberikan perhatian yang cermat pada perilaku pengambilan, pada perilaku pembicara, keraguan, jeda, dan perilaku paralinguistik, misalnya tertawa, menarik nafas, dan lain sebagainya. Inilah contoh dari instruksional sosiolinguistik. Jack, do you want me to come as well? And then call, dude, don't wear after tie bar, sambil tertawa, yeah, you can go incognito. General laughter. Jack, hide in the back row. And then general laughter. Just don't say anything. Nah, jelas dari tawa para pria itu saling bertukar komentar lucu, tetapi hampir tidak mungkin untuk mengetahui dengan tepat apa yang terjadi pada kejadian itu. Anggota tim sedang mendiskusikan pertemuan yang mereka rencanakan untuk menghadiri, di mana orang-orang dari tim lain akan hadir. Penting untuk mengetahui bahwa Yakob telah diperbantukan keterangan dari perusahaan Amerika Asar Produk dan Leigh dan Barry memberikan saran-saran lucu tentang kondisi yang memungkinkan Yakob menemani mereka ke pertemuan besar di mana mereka akan berinteraksi dengan orang-orang lain tim. Nah, setiap kontribusi menguraikan proporsinya yang mendasari. Anda dapat datang ke rapat hanya jika Anda secara jelas mengidentifikasikan sebagai salah satu dari kami. Dengan kata lain, Yakob diminta untuk berbaur dan tidak mengiklankan bahwa dia adalah orang asing dari organisasi luar. Dan dia jelas mengerti maksudnya karena menambahkan sarannya sendiri di baris ke-6. Selanjutnya, contextualization cues. Roughly speaking, a contextualization cues is any feature of linguistic form that contributes to the signaling of contextual presuppositions. Contextualization cues signal contextual presuppositions like knowledge that the speakers assume the listener has already, or information that they can work out for themselves by paying attention to features of the text. Contextualization cues thus allow participants to infer the most likely interpretation of an utterance. Contextualization cues include verbal, nonverbal, and prosodic signal, as well as manipulation of artifacts. Jadi, contextualization cues ini memungkinkan peserta untuk menyimpulkan interpretasi yang paling mungkin dari suatu ucapan. Misalnya, isyarat kontekstualisasi pengucapan, sinyal verbal, nonverbal, dan prosodik, serta manipulasi artefak. Lalu, so, why should we know about contextualization cues? Mengapa kita harus tahu tentang isyarat kontekstualisasi? Yang pertama, an important source of information, and then number 2 are central to understanding the transmission and construction of meaning. If we don't know contextualization cues, misunderstanding like cross talk culture this is example of contextualization cues. Capitals indicate higher volume and underline indicate strong stress. Woman commenting on a gymnastic performance she has seen at her son's school. I went to gymnastics display last night. It was good. Falling intonation might indicate that speakers is providing definitive information in answer to a question. Jadi intonasi yang turun mungkin menunjukkan bahwa pembicara memberikan informasi yang pasti untuk menjawab pertanyaan. And then, woman director to older male subordinate, Mia. You know the ventilation fan? I'm talking that we should leave it on during the daytime. The switch is inside the building. Then sorry to bother, but when you leave, and then Tommy answer, yes, I got it. Mia, turn off the switch. Mia succeeded so well in getting up the shared contact and aligning herself with Tommy, her address, that he anticipates her directive and overlaps her articulation of it. Her supportive moves to skew to upcoming directive and ensure he interprets her intent accurately. Non-verbal behavior such as facial expressions, head nods, gestures, and silence also provide very important contextualization cues which are valuable when analyzing video data. A raised eyebrow can give a very clear indication of how an utterance has been interpreted, though its precise meaning may differ between cultures. In Polynesia cultures, for instance, a raised eyebrow served as a greeting, whereas in British culture, a raised eyebrow generally conveys surprise or even disbelief. And then B, miscommunication. Miskomunikasi ini bisa terjadi karena yang pertama, cross culture, interaction with persons of different culture, ethnic, racial, gender, sexual orientation, religious, age, and class backgrounds. And then cross-culture communication. And then number 3 is examine causes of misunderstanding. This is example of misunderstanding. In a British cafeteria, an Indian woman rupa serving behind the counter spread doom and gloom, and aroused customer resentment simply because of the way she served the gravy. The customers had her as peremptorily stating that they should have gravy, whether they wanted it or not. When the customers' complaints were reported to the woman, she expressed surprise. She claimed she had been offering them gravy, not pushing it on them. Jadi ini adalah kesalahpahaman antara wanita India tadi dengan pelanggannya, hanya karena si wanita India tadi berbeda dalam mengungkapkan perkataannya, mungkin dari intonasi atau cara bicaranya. Dan setelah pelanggan melaporkan wanita tersebut, dia merasa terkejut karena dia hanya menyatakan bahwa dia telah menawari mereka saus, bukan untuk memaksanya. Jadi ini ada kesalahpahaman antara rupa wanita India tadi dengan pelanggan. Seperti itu. Thanks for your attention. And then the next presenter is Rama.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I will explain the material about conversation analysis. Definition: conversation analysis, approach to the study of social interaction, embracing both verbal and non-verbal conducts in situations of everyday life. As its name implies, conversation analysis begins with a focus on causal, but its methods were subsequently adapted to embrace more task and institution-centered interaction, such as those occurring in doctor office, court, law enforcement, educational settings, and the mass media. The development of conversation analysis. Conversation analysis was developed in the late 1916 and early 1917, principally by the sociologist Harvey Sachs and his close associates Emmanuel Sigloff and Gail Jefferson. Today, conversation analysis is an established method used in sociology, anthropology, linguistics, speech communication, and psychology. At the simple level, for instance, it is noticeable that many interactions involve adjacency pairs, related utterance produced by two successive speakers in such a way that the second utterance is identified as a follow-up to the first. Example: A. Hi there. B. Hi. Example B. A. See you later. B. See you. Example C. A. What packs are you on? B. 33. Example D. A. Wanna come up for dinner tonight? B. Yeah, thanks. That'd be nice. Preferred and dispreferred counterparts. The example in exercise 40 indicate that identifying adjacency pairs is not always straightforward. As mentioned in the answer, conversation analysis looks for internal linguistic inclusion and paralinguistic class to assess. So OK often function as an acknowledgement of a point match. Well may signal that a qualification is coming text, as in example 28. Example: Monica, wasn't that a great concert? Don, well, I was a bit tired. Though Don does not say so explicitly, the use of well to introduce the second part of this adjacency pair, responding to Monica's solicitation of his opinion, suggests he does not agree with her. His comment, I was a bit tired, can be interpreted as an excuse, implying that lack of attention explains his lack of appreciation. Conversational feedback. Adjacency pairs are one aspect of the systematic of turn-taking, which is a focus of conversation analysis. Attention to conversational feedback is another. At times in a conversation, one person may hold the floor for a period while recounting a narrative, for instance, or describing an experience, or explaining how something works. Meanwhile, the other participant typically provides evidence that they are attending to the speaker. Some kind of feedback which might be verbal. Right, or non-verbal, with nodding, attentive gaze. Example 32. Dominic, a cat 7, is phoning his parent to say he is about to be drive home by his house. Horn. Kring, kring. Dad. Hello Oxford, blah 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 blah. Dom. Dad. Dad. Oh Dom. Dom. I'm coming home in 10 minutes. Dad. You are come in 10 minutes. Dom. Yeah. Dad. Oh good boy, you enjoyed yourself. Dom. Yeah. Dad. Good. Very nice. Are you still there, Dom? Dom. Dad. Alright then, Pat. We'll be waiting on you, alright. Dom. Yeah, bye. Dad. Bye. Next, interruption and overlaps. Conversation analysis. Researchers argue that talk constitutes particular institutional realities. In other words, discourse is the very stuff of many interactions, especially in areas such as the law, in teaching and in business meetings. As its label implies, conversation analysis treats the pattern of ordinary conversation as primary. Systematic alternation between reasonably equal turns at talking, negotiated implicitly, is regarded as the basic conversational model. Example 34 indicates a non-specific vocalization. Signal a dental click. Layla, the chair, opens a meeting of her team of 6 in a government department. Before she speaks, there is a burst of small talk between various people around the table. Layla. Right, where all here, let's get started. Burst of talk stops. Okay, we are starting with plans for a meeting with the WIT group. Alice, what information technology? Layla. Yes. Carol, assume organized another meeting, an introductory meeting for next Wednesday. Carol, do you want to brief people? Carol, thanks. Yes, well, the meeting is scheduled for blah blah blah. Layla uses a typical meeting opening discourse maker right. Together with her declaration, we are all here, let's get started, followed by a 2-second pause to open the meeting. This pause, unlike those in casual conversation, is not a position in the interaction that someone else is expected to speak. As chair, Layla has the right to the next turn after she declares the meeting open. Thereafter, despite the brief overlap between Elizabeth and Layla in lines 2 and 3, where Elizabeth expands on the acronym, the basic pattern here is that one person speaks at a time. This is the typical turn-taking pattern for orderly spoken interaction in many Western contexts, and especially in formal meetings. People are very proficient at positioning their next conversational turns precisely at a point known as a transition relevance place or TRP, where the previous speaker has completed their turn. In many conversations, there are few or minimal overlaps. People read the synthetic, prosodic, and non-verbal signal that a TRP is pausing and lets their utterance to the previous speaker with great skill while in formal meetings there are even short pauses between speaker turns. Next, keeping just to the text. It is worth emphasizing an important methodological point that has been briefly mentioned several times in the discussion so far. A basic characteristic of a conversation analysis approach is that you should not begin the analysis with any preconceived ideas about what will be worth examining. Unlike the ethnography of communication and the interactional sociolinguistic approaches, the analysis should not include any information from your field notes or interviews or participants' reflection on the talk. The data is primary, and all relevant information should be deducible from the data, and relevant categories for analysis should arise out of the data. Critiques of conversation analysis. Conversation analysis is an invaluable tool for the analysis of spoken discourse, yet it is somewhat monolithic. Conversation analysis view of itself as self-sufficient research tool is problematic. It does not need data other than the conversation to explain and justify its claim. Data analysis are working as spectators, not participants. Conversation analysis is lack of attention to uses of power, inequality, and social disadvantage. It is also lack of attention to wider historical, cultural, and political issues. Enough. Thanks.
Critical discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis, by contrast, is explicitly concerned with investigating how language is used to construct and maintain power relationship in society. The aim is to show up connection between language and power, and between language and ideology. Sexist and racist language are obvious targets for the critical discourse analysis. But critical discourse analysis research has a very wide agenda and includes the analysis of political speeches, medical textbook, advertising and marketing strategies, and many other forms of rhetoric. Critical discourse analysis often make use of aspects of other approach. The example, many use a critical analysis approach to describe the ways in which participants manipulate the rules of conversation in order to gain a political advantage. Power and critical discourse analysis. The theories of power have provide various strategies and mechanisms of power that can be extracted and highlighted in relation to critical discourse analysis. Power in critical discourse analysis is everywhere, and no language in use can ever be neutral or objective. And no discourse can ever be free of power and the exercise of power. Power is not derived from language, but language can be used to challenge power, to provide a finally articulate means for difference in power in social hierarchy structure. We can see from the example. This example illustrates a situation where the turn-taking rules are not those of commit members supposedly treating each other as equals, but rather those of participants in an explicitly unequal encounter. In this unequal encounter, the police officer has the right to ask questions and to expect the suspect to answer them. In lines 1 until 4, the police officer first asks them to confirm something he has said earlier in that right line 2, and then isn't that what you said, Sam? on line 4. Sam is not given a chance to respond to the first request for confirmation. There is no pause after is that right? Before the second preposition and request for confirmation are put to him. If you compare this interaction with a conversation with a friend, it is immediately apparent that this technique could be interpreted as badgering and even verbally bullying Sam into a response. The police officer is here challenging Sam to confirm a proposition that will form the foundation for an argument that he needs to sell the cannabis he grows in order to survive. It appears that Sam does not see the trap since he voluntarily reveals that he is in need of money for extracts above bar sustenance on line 7. The police officer then asks another question: where are you growing that cannabis? On line 8. And when Sam responds, the police officer challenges the accuracy of his response by referring to earlier information that he has supplied, which contradict the implications of this response that the place he is growing cannabis belongs to him. In any normal conversation, Sam's use of the phrase "my own big right" is understandable, given that it is the backyard of the place in which he is living. The police officer challenge thus remind us that this is a formal interview where precisions about such details is a legal issue. In later section of this interview, the police officer overtly challenged Sam with questions such as, "What do you have to say, Sam? Come on, Sam, I'm asking you some straight question. Is that what you are saying? Is that right? Isn't that what you say?" The features of the discourse clearly indicate that this is an equal encounter. A critical discourse analysis approach focuses on such features to demonstrate how the police officer uses verbal means to intimidate the suspect and make him feel powerless. Power may also be enacted in more subtle ways in interaction, which are apparently very urban and democratic. Setting the agenda of a discussion, for instance, is one of exercising influence in even will will be includes it subtly exerting control over the topics of talk which will be considered relevant. In a formal meeting, this may take the form of a written agenda whose contents are determined by the meeting chairs in advance. When there is no written agenda, the meeting chairs usually exercise power by determining what topics will be discussed and who may contribute. Thank you.
My name is Faridha Sigmayana, and I will continue explaining the material, ideology, and critical discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis research aims to expose the hidden message and especially the taken for granted assumptions that underlie much of our everyday discourse because advertisers make use of discourse to influence our behaviors, typically to persuade us to buy their product. Adverts are one of the most obvious targets of CTA. Adverts appeal to their audience emotion, their desire and fears, and to their often unexamined attitude and beliefs. Other focus of CDA has been discourse, which is apparently neutral and informative, but which on closer examination turns out to be manipulative and even distorting. Even more interesting because less obvious are the subtle ways in which our response are manipulated in contexts which are supposedly source of information, such as newspaper reports or even textbook context, where we are perhaps less aware of the underlying orientations and goals of the writers or speakers. Jadi, peneliti ke critical discourse analysis ini bertujuan untuk mengungkapkan pesan tersembunyi dan asumsi yang diterima begitu saja yang mendasari berbagai besar wacana sehari-hari. Nah, ini biasanya terdapat pada iklan yang membujuk kita untuk membeli produk mereka. Nah, ini iklan adalah salah satu target CDA yang paling jelas. Nah, ini biasanya terdapat pada surat kabar, bahkan buku teks yang dimana kita mungkin kurang menyadari apa tujuan yang mendasarinya dari penulis atau pembaca. Lanjut, ini adalah the example of ideology and critical discourse analysis. Di sini ada cerita, di sini ada sebuah kalimat yang isinya yang A itu menggunakan kalimat pasif. Nah, ini menggunakan kalimat pasif menghilangkan referensi apapun ke aktor atau agen, yaitu dokter atau, sehingga memungkinkan penulis untuk menghindari pengalokasian tanggung jawab eksplisit kepada dokter atas keputusan untuk melakukan operasi sebagai dan menyampaikan kesan objektivitas klinis. Nah, yang B ini sebaliknya, memperlakukan target wanita sebagai agen yang cerdas daripada pasif. Mereka ditujukan sebagai orang kedua, memberikan kesan keramahan dan solidaritas yang B ini. Selain itu, informasi yang diberikan lebih memberdayakan daripada diktatif. Pembaca disajikan dengan alternatif dan komentar evaluatif dan direkomendasikan untuk mencari opini kedua. Ini adalah pendekatan yang sangat berbeda dari A dan B. Pendekatan CDA berupaya mengidentifikasi cara-cara di mana pembaca atau pendengar dimanipulasi melalui pilihan kata dan konstruksi tertentu untuk mengambil posisi tertentu dalam kaitannya dengan topik diskusi. Nah, inilah yang dimaksud ideology and critical discourse analysis.